I was there at St. Joe and Diamond working, mid-morning, my cell phone rings. I don't recognize the number. So this woman, I didn't recognize her because she was distressed. Jean had already been shot, and I was the first contact on her phone. She says, this man come in and shot me.
You're listening to River City Mystery, a podcast that delves into the Evansville and surrounding tri-state area's mysteries, including unsolved crimes, murders, and disappearances. A show that isn't afraid to jump down the rabbit hole to investigate reports of local hauntings, sightings of UAPs and cryptids, among other paranormal phenomena. With your host, law office worker by day, insomniac researcher of the unknown by night, Matt Dyke. It's been 20 years since Georgia Jean Cook was shot to death while working at the Buslers on 41 North in Evansville, Indiana. Jean Cook was a 56-year-old mother of two on October 6, 2005. She was just working a shift to make ends meet, 3 hours to the end of her shift, when someone wanders in with a gun, shoots her twice, leaves her on the floor to bleed to death in the gas station, while they steal money out of the register. Absolutely senseless, leaving two children without a mother for whatever was in a register at the gas station. Unbelievable. And this person 20 years later is still on the loose. They have not been caught. They got away with it. And to make matters worse, the video surveillance wasn't working at that location that day, so there's no video of this happening. What we do have, however, is a witness statement. There was a man pumping gas at the time of the shooting, and he says he saw a white woman with bushy gray hair, about 45 to 60 years old, standing about 5 feet 6 inches tall, and wearing dark clothing. He says that she got into a mid-size bluish-gray domestic four-door sedan and headed north on 41. That is the extent of our description of the killer. There is an artist rendering of that description, and I've got that in the show notes. And I've also kind of played around with some AI programs, so I converted that sketch into what a real human might look like. So I've posted those as well because, who knows, maybe that might trigger somebody to recognize somebody. But there really isn't much to go on there. It's kind of a vague description of a woman, honestly. And there's debate over whether it was a woman or a man in a wig or in some sort of disguise. And we're going to talk about that later in the episode, but I speak with Andy Hinton, who actually spoke with Jean after she was shot. She says he shot me. So she thinks it was a man, or maybe just when you're shocked after you've been shot, you don't think clearly, but she seemed to indicate that it was a man that had shot her for some reason. So speaking of Andy, he actually reached out to me and asked me to look into this case a little bit. So that's why it was brought to my attention. Andy was friends with Jean and was a co-worker of hers. And after Jean was shot, Jean actually called Andy's phone first. And so Andy shares his insights into the case and, what his thoughts are, as well as the events of that day. I also speak with Fred Cook, who is the son of Jean Cook, and he shares some of his thoughts on this case as well. I reached out to Bobby Jo, the daughter. She's dealing with some medical issues right now, so she's just not feeling well enough to be able to talk, but the invitation is always open. If Bobby Jo would ever like in the future to speak about this case with me, it's an open invitation. Just reach out to me and we're on. But first we have Andy Hinton, who again was Jean's coworker who received that call from Jean after she was shot. This is my conversation with Andy.
Yeah. So, I worked with Jean a couple years on St. Joe and Diamond.
Mm-hmm.
And she was a good woman. I mean, really sweet, family oriented. So I guess Busler's was struggling with that location up there at 41 in Old State. So they had sent her up there to kind of turn the store around,
Mm-hmm.
when you get a good manager, you can kind of maybe, if you're not making any money, you can kind of make it profitable.
Sure.
So they sent her up there, and I don't even remember how long she was up there for, but this incident happened. One day I was there at St. Joe and Diamond working, mid-morning, my cell phone rings, and I don't recognize the number. So this woman, I didn't recognize her because she was distressed. Jean had already been shot, and I was the first contact on her phone. They're the first one to come up, but I was kind of her contact for a lot of stuff within, the workplace. She says, this man come in and shot me. And I said, who is this? I didn't know who it was. I couldn't tell it was Jean. So I kind of listen in the background and I hear Simona. I thought it was just a prank call. And so I kind of share the phone around the office. I said, does anybody recognize this number? Nobody knew. Nobody knew. And finally kind of hung up. Well, she ended up calling like 3 or 4 times.
Mm.
And at that point, I don't know if, nobody knows. I put people on the phone, pass the phone around. Does anybody know what this is? And she's not really making sense. She kind of moaning and whatever. Like, maybe if it was a landline, she may have just said it on the counter, something like that. So, and this is a long time ago, right? So whenever we had contacted each other, I was like, I'll try to recall, what I can. But anyway, later on, I think kind of a little disturbed, not thinking anything of it. And we have the radio on and we hear it over the radio. And we all kind of realized that was Jean. That was Jean. She was calling us to say that she'd been shot and, had some sort of emergency.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so you were the first contact on her phone, so that's why she's probably punching away at numbers on her phone, and like your name comes, or probably the
Yes.
St. Joe store pops up on the list there, so she's just calling that over and over.
This was my cell phone.
Your cell phone, okay.
Yes.
And so you guys were you guys good friends, or because you had worked together? You had said,
we'd worked together for a couple years there on St. Joe, just really close. My desk was real close to her little desk and office, and she did the paperwork and kind of managed the little convenience store up there.
And she was friends with everyone, no enemies. That no one's ever reported there being any enemies or anything like that. It sounds like.
No, not at all. She knew a lot of people on the west side. I think she lived off of Rexing Road somewhere for a while. And no, everyone loved her, and she's a good woman.
Was she the type? Because I mentioned this on my Discord server, and we were just kind of tossing around ideas and brainstorming before talking to you. And some people thought, well, was she the type to, if she had overheard or maybe witnessed something she shouldn't have at that gas station, was there any sort of drug activity or anything that she might have witnessed and maybe threatened to go to the police or say, hey, I'm gonna call a tip in or something? Like, would there have been possibly some sort of weird activity going on that she might have overheard?
Well, there's a story here,
Okay.
right, Matt? And I don't know how much that I know to be true.
Okay.
So I don't know that I want to comment on anything that's not factual.
Sure.
But I do know that it was a different time at that point. Gas stations and convenience stores and drugstores sold pseudoephedrine, right?
Which is used to make methamphetamine, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And we, all the gas stations said we weren't doing something that anyone else wasn't doing at the time. And at the time, I think, if I could recall this, because I didn't have anything to do with the convenience store side of things. I ran more of the oil company side.
Okay.
So I believe the laws were like maybe you could buy 2 boxes a day.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know, to be honest with you. I don't know. We had a woman that kind of managed that whole program. Her name was Nancy Markham. She kind of managed the gas stations, and then Charlie Wolfinger, he was the president, and he which Charlie is he was an ex-sheriff deputy
Okay.
at one point. So he was very knowledgeable on the case.
Right.
He was working really close with the authorities because I think he's still sworn in as a deputy. So you might reach out to him because he knows more facts on the case than I do. But anyway, back to the pseudo-ephedrine. So you kind of got some shady characters coming in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think you could buy a couple boxes a day. You had to record it, put their names down. So there's a record of who's buying this stuff. And I always suspected that it had something to do with that.
Okay. Like, so someone might have been pretending to be someone else to get maybe a bigger supply, and then maybe she recognized that person and said, "Hey, you're so and so." But she didn't say that on the phone call though. She said, "I've been robbed by."
Well, no, she said, "I've been shot."
I've been shot.
But a man came in here and shot me, and I know that which is crazy because everybody has been looking for a woman.
Right.
It could have been a man with a wig. I don't know, but she had said a man had come in and shot me from her own word.
Looking through some old newspaper articles, there was a witness who I guess came in the store after she was shot and called 911. Apparently, he was able to ask one question, the article said, and it said, was this a robbery? And she says, yes. And that was literally all he could get out of her, if she's struggling to talk and maybe disoriented or something.
Sure.
I don't know, but that's what she told that person. And, and I guess they saw a woman with curly hair and 45 to 60 years old, leave putting something in her purse, but she told you it was a man.
Like you said, if you're shot, you're not making a whole lot of sense. Eyewitness is going to be a better than a phone call. Eyewitness is better testimony, I guess.
Well, I mean, it just sounds like there's confusion all around. I mean, the police don't even know if they're looking for a male or a female or, somebody in disguise or what the motive was. And I guess that's how this person has remained so elusive for all these years. And unfortunately, it sounds like when she started the day, she had left the video surveillance running all night. So when she got to the store, she actually turned it. She thought she was turning it on, and apparently she was turning it off. So there was no surveillance.
Right. I had heard something about that. That's a little something doesn't sound real, doesn't put past smell test is what some would say, as far as I know, those were on continuous loops. I don't really remember the style they had, but I think it was VHS at the time.
Okay.
Not real. I don't think it was digital. But like I said, some other people, like Charlie or Nancy might even be able to know more than I would on that.
Did you ever know if I can't find that they actually saw a license plate on this car that drove off. Apparently they saw a bluish-gray 4-door sedan drive off heading north on 41 after the shooting, but no one has ever mentioned if they had someone's caught a glimpse of the license plate, I wonder.
Right. No, I had not heard that, but we're really close to 64. You could go east or west and be gone in a matter of no time. So it could have been a random robbery. It could have, but with the things that were going on up there, I just don't think so.
And that was my short discussion with Andy, and I appreciate he reached out to me to put this case on my radar very much. And I did reach out to Charlie Wolfinger, the president of Busler Enterprises, and he basically directed me to the detective Randy Chapman. He said that Randy's going to know everything, have all the answers to the questions I have. So I went ahead and just went with the interview with Randy, which is coming up here shortly. And up next, we've got my interview with Fred Cook. Now, Fred is Gene Cook's son, so we get to hear his perspective on what this case is like for him and his thoughts on the investigation and things along those lines. So this is my discussion with Fred.
I guess to me, knowing where it happened at is probably why it is not solved, because that is one major thoroughfare. And with the limited amount of, back, I guess obviously back then, even though there was cameras there was just not enough people stopping by there at that little store. Nowadays you see every convenience store around packed on every corner, but that one there was not, a very busy store with the big ones just right down the road.
Yeah, and it was kind of isolated where it was too. It was kind of like it's in its own little area there where there wasn't a lot else around there. So I guess it'd be easy for somebody to get in and out of there. Now, there were a couple of witnesses who saw the person coming out, they say, and there's been kind of conflicting information about that as well. Like, was it a man or a woman, somebody in disguise?
Yep, that's that's been the one that's bothered me the most. Is it's went back and forth between whether it was a man, whether it was a woman, it was a gray haired, it was an older. Nobody really knew. There were speculations of the car. So it's hard. And you think about it every time you drive by there now that it's an empty lot. What was missed, what could have been found, and what could have been seen had it not happened right there. But yeah, everything that I talked to, whenever I was talking to the detectives on it, I would get phone calls and of course reach out, in the days that pretty much took place after that in the weeks, then, as they said, it's like, hey, we'll reach out if we get something promising. They traveled, they went to a lot of places. I mean, there was a lead even down under the bridge, under the Twin Bridges that I actually got to travel with down there, and just to kind of see at the same time. And it was, there was even that close of one. They went down, they looked for a specific vehicle that was supposed to be down there. And so they went down, checked out one of the trailers that was down there, and it led out to be nothing at all. But there was all kinds of people talking, certain people that were in jail talked about it, and they tried to get their way out of it, but it turned out to be nothing. And we would get phone calls on it all the time. Hey, this is what we're going on. This is what we're hearing. We're going to go check this out. This could be a possibility. This person was in the area. This person knew it. But over the years, it all faded out, and then nothing has really transpired again after that. And then, I pretty much talked to all of them until they, I guess, have transferred cases to different detectives over the time, and because detectives have retired and so forth.
Like, what do you think happened? Like, if you had to put all your money on one bet, like, what do you think actually happened?
I would have to say it was a random one-off at this point, because I honestly don't know why or who or anybody like that in their nature would do that again. But it was such a secluded, small convenience store that would make it easy for somebody to go in and do something. I honestly don't know why or how, but that's the only thing I can come up with. Never, to my knowledge, across the board, my mom never had no enemies across the board at all. She was an older lady just working to make ends meet and survive like everybody else does, and
yeah, it doesn't sound like she had anybody who had anything out for her or anything like that. I mean, one thing, you wonder if maybe she had staggered upon a transaction she shouldn't have seen or something, and maybe somebody tried to make sure she wouldn't have gone to the police with it or something. I don't know. I mean, you have to just get creative at some point and say, what in the world? But then, like you said, sometimes maybe it's just a random thing where some lunatic took advantage of a situation and wanted to rob her cash register, and
that's the only thing that I can come up with. There's no rhyme or reason to it. I do not. For the life of me, I've ran every possible scenario through my own head.
I bet, yeah.
Trying to figure it out, and I never even got to talk to her. I mean, by the time I was at the hospital, she was already to the point of not being able to communicate. And so that was kind of where, it'd be nice to have been able to say, hey, what did you see? Give me something, talk to me. But you got to think about it. Even by that time there, within a 20-minute span, down 41 to 64 in any direction.
Oh, yeah.
That's a lot of miles covered for anything. Nowadays, if you look at every single convenience store and grocery store and campus, there is a camera on every light pole, gas pump. I mean, every vehicle is scanned. And one of the things that has always been brought to mind is if you're standing there pumping gas and something was to happen, would you be able to identify even two vehicles around you in the drop of a hat?
Probably not.
So that question always comes up. That's one of the things, my wife would even be one to tell you too. I never sat with my back to the door anywhere I'm at. I always look out to where I can see what's going on around me. It's something that I've always done my whole life. And I'm always diligent about what's going on around me. I still say to this day that even if somebody walked up to me while I was pumping gas, and as soon as I got done and put the gas pump on, got to get in the car, they said, can you tell me what car is to the left and right of you? I would, even though as diligent as I am about it, I would probably say, could you draw a blank instantly? You draw a blank almost as soon as somebody corners you with it.
But then you also feel like you should know. So does your brain like fill in the gaps and say, oh, it was a 4-door bluish-gray something or another. And it's like, then, oh yeah, then you remember trying to remember that. And like, it's like a false memory kind of a thing.
So that's one of the that's one of the things about it. It does. I mean, you think, just if that one, I think they even try to do some hypnosis on some of the people that were there. Yeah, to try to get them to do a little memory, because they did. I knew that's what one of the detectives said. He goes, we're going to try to do hypnosis, see if they can't bring back some of the subconscious, to see if they can bring back some other memories and some of that. And that was pretty short after, while everything was still fresh. But it didn't lead up to nothing.
It might just be something they never released, but it seems like there's a lot of questions and it's just not a lot of answers in your mom's case. No, so it's like
not at all. And it just went quiet. I feel like they chased every ghost that they could chase. I think and I don't know how detectives work, but I like to think that it's always still sitting on somebody's desk when there ain't something going on. It's like, hey, let's dig back into this for a little while and see what we can come up with.
Yeah, a lot of times something has to happen, like somebody cracks in somebody gets arrested and it turns out that they end up telling one of their cellmates something else that leads to something else, and then it kind of breaks everything wide open. So that just apparently hasn't happened yet, but fingers crossed that something does happen and they find this person.
Well, those conversations have been had too about the fact that they're waiting on, that usually the bad people usually end up either in a bar or in jail and start talking. He says, and then when you get that person to start talking, that usually leads to this other person saying, this is my opportunity to get out of here. I'm going to say so. I was told that by the detectives more than once, because we're just kind of waiting on that break.
My thinking is that maybe, and 20 years have passed. So I was thinking maybe somebody who might have thought a certain way 20 years ago might have had a change of heart and been like, I didn't want to say anything back then. Somebody did say something, but I'm in a different point in my life now, and I think I'm going to come forward. Because you never know. Somebody just might not want to mess with the police, but they do know something that's kind of important. So,
right, and they may think it's going to end up putting them in a position where they think they're going to get in trouble, and
exactly,
because you just just like you said, nobody ever really knows what they can and cannot say. So that's always just kept in the back of their mind. But you figured conscience would eat at you after a while.
Right, especially the older you get, maybe you start. You'd think so. Some people, but I mean, usually. These people aren't brilliant, so they say something to the wrong person, and just somebody has to come forward. Somebody knows something.
You would think
is my guess. So it's just a matter of time. Or something that could happen is the person was arrested for something else and may just be sitting in jail or something else, and just never, nobody ever connected the dots. I guess we just never know that either.
Just keeping it to themselves the whole time. Like, I'll take this to my grave, and I'm not worried about it.
I feel horrible for you guys, and you've always been on my mind for the last 20 years. And I remember seeing the billboards of your mom up, and it's just hopefully putting the spotlight on your mom's case helps out in some way, just gets it out there and gets people talking about it again.
Yeah. I mean, I hope so. I mean, and I'm glad you reached out. I appreciate it. I've had news people call multiple times, and, in the news is one thing, it does get out there, but sometimes, I mean, they battered it pretty hard during that, and they did their job and so on. But sometimes they're just looking to fill in time, and it's like, it's just not all about that.
Right.
I'm more interested in more of a casual situation. If I'm going to discuss it, just kind of let it be at that. And my sister, she is in bad way right now. So she fought it for a long time. She stayed diligent with it for a very long time, trying to keep it up.
I mean, you can only put so much energy into something before it starts affecting your own health and well-being. And it's like, you have to kind of, I can't imagine having a family member, lose a family member like that, to have to deal with that in any way, shape, or form. So,
and you hope that the law, and you leave you leave the side of it to the law to make sure they do their job. That's what they're trying to do every day. Just like people are trying to do a lot of things. You reach out to professionals and say, this is all in you guys. So, but again, that one right there, just like probably many others that go unfound every day, every year. It's like finding a needle in a haystack unless it's just cut and dry. And so, I give them, I'm glad they're out there. I'm glad they did what they did, and I'm glad they're doing what they're doing at this point for this one and for many others.
Yeah.
Just to, they have their work cut out for them.
Yeah. The thing is, the technology is always improving. So their ability to connect the dots is always made easier with the technology, I think. So maybe something will happen somewhere else, and that'll trigger something in a system where they'll be like, oh, wait a minute.
And having that building gone, I feel like sometimes probably put a hurt to that.
Yeah.
Granted, it hasn't been gone for terribly long, but going back up there and being able to step over everything, maybe even with the technology, maybe figuring out that there was something going on with the cameras and they were actually recording and they just didn't see it. Nowadays you could have probably pulled that out and maybe seen, who knows?
Right.
There's a lot of that ifs, ands, and buts that trail back across the board too. We'll see. Maybe you throwing this out there might actually, stem it up a little bit again and get people, just like you said, talking, looking around and questioning things.
And that is one of the main goals of my podcast, is to bring a spotlight on some of these cold cases that people are not talking about, just to kind of stir up the conversation again. And cases like Gene Cook's that have been sitting there for 20 years, and hopefully maybe somebody sees this and maybe recognizes a picture or something, and it might start a conversation that leads to something. That's the goal anyway. And if you have any information on the murder of Gene Cook, contact the Vanderburgh County Sheriff's Department at 812-461-6200. Andy Lasher is the detective currently working on Gene's case. You can submit an anonymous tip on the Vanderburgh County Sheriff's Department website, and I've got a link for that down in the show notes. I want to thank Fred and Andy for taking the time out to talk to me today, and hopefully we're one step closer to solving this case and bringing some closure to the family. I want to thank everybody for listening, and until next time, take care.